Hello, everyone. This is Cody Lee of BlackCatBooks.org, author of Jaw the Dragon, releasing June 10th, 2023. Immediately after The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom launch, there was a flurry of damage control from all sorts of people: YouTubers, game journalists, analysts. Going into launch, we were told this was going to be the last Switch game ever, that the Switch 2 release was imminent, and this would be a middling, disappointing rehash sequel from Breath of the Wild. And of course, that didn't happen. Of course, we have lots of content coming up on Nintendo Switch. Tears of the Kingdom was a huge hit. It was a huge success, and it, in a lot of ways, improved on the already 10 out of 10 Breath of the Wild. So everyone who was glooming and dooming about this game, who was making it up, who was making things up, who are trying to downplay this game before release, are awkwardly trying to have to pivot away. They're trying to try and say that they're trying to come up with a new narrative. They're coming up with something that they're trying to find something that they can complain about. They're doing everything they possibly can, from complaining about the physics engine, to complaining about the link, to complaining about the reused map, to complaining about this or that, anything they possibly can do to try and downplay this release. And one of the things I noticed, and I've had a couple of fans and people who watch my content point this out as well, one of the things they did immediately was try to say, okay, what's next? Right? That was the big narrative, the first couple of weeks after launch, is that, Tears of the Kingdom is here. Okay, it's the last big Switch game, supposedly. So what is Nintendo going to do next? There's nothing in the pipeline for the foreseeable future. Let's ignore the fact that they can technically drop a Nintendo Direct whenever they want and start talking about games like Raincode, like Operation, like Metroid Prime 4, Pikmin 4. Forget that, they have all this DLC that's coming out, Splatoon 3, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Pokemon. Forget that, we have quite a few games on the horizon that we can talk about. Let's just pretend that there's nothing on the pipeline, and that this Zelda game, which is several hundred hours long, let's forget about all that and just speculate that oh man, this game is old now. It's a couple of weeks old. People have played the game. It's old news. Let's move on to the next thing. And it was just a desperate attempt, I think, at kind of downplaying the game. Even before people had really gotten a chance to play it or experience it or have any idea about it at all. I didn't finish the game until about 2 weeks after launch, right? Within the first couple of days or the first couple of hours, there were people saying this, that Zelda was out now and was no longer a big deal, and that we should start getting excited for the next thing. And it really it's just one of those things that I think has been always a problem in the gaming sphere, because I remember this happening with Twilight Princess and lots of games in the mid 2000s where people would play through a game in a weekend and then start bitching about oh man, there aren't enough games to play. Oh, it's a game drought. What do I have to look forward to now? And Nintendo releases new games all the time, but certain people who don't really do anything else are constantly getting upset at them for oh man, I'm not being entertained enough. Where are all the games, Nintendo? Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, it's not enough. Where's my Mario games? Where's everything else? And it's just so out of touch with the industry at large. You could play older games, you could play games for another company, you could do something, go outside, right? There are so many things you could do in that hypothetical situation where you've played all the games you're interested in, right? And I just never, every time this happens, these people try desperately to blame Nintendo, right? Make Nintendo responsible for their own lack of amusement, right? Their own inability to have fun with Nintendo Switch, their own inability to find something they would be interested in on Nintendo Switch that they haven't played. And more, I have to wonder if people are starting to push back against it, because 20 years ago that was a big narrative, right? that was something that like people actually listened to and believe. And this time, when they tried like doing it with Tears of the Kingdom, it didn't really stick, right? Like there's so much content on Nintendo Switch. Like I have a hard time believing that anybody, not only like blasted through Tears of the Kingdom in like 2 weeks, but like can't find anything else to play on the console, right? I myself still had to get through games like GoldenEye 007, like Wario Land 3. I'm looking into playing like finishing Persona 5, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. I have games like Onimusha Warlords I want to play again. Devil May Cry 2, 3. I have like, some indie games that I've picked out that I want to try. Like, I am like swamped with releases right now. In fact, I've been like cutting back on game purchases because I haven't been able to keep up with all of it. And it's just weird to me, that we keep seeing this constantly. That we see Pretendos try and say that like there's nothing to play, there's nothing to look forward to, there's nothing that I want to experience. Like, unless you have a brand new game on your console, like I'm not interested in playing. It's such a silly way of looking at your video game console. It's such a ridiculous like mindset to have, really. And I do think it's like born of like the PlayStation and Xbox demographic who, don't actually like playing games, but just like consuming like the big popular thing that comes out. So they can talk about it for a couple of weeks and then just move on to the next shiny thing, right? As opposed to Nintendo fans who just actually like playing games that they enjoy, right? Which is, an alien concept if you're not a Nintendo fan, right? I think that I think Tears of the Kingdom has proven itself to be an extremely difficult game to downplay. Even now, we're still seeing like game journalists like Yahtzee and Jim Sterling. We're seeing a lot of people like getting angry about it, like Tears of the Kingdom and how popular it is, because I think it demonstrates the fact that like Nintendo was able to do this twice. That Zelda is not going away, right? In the '90s, game journalists were pretty successful in like downplaying Ocarina of Time, downplaying Wind Waker and Majora's Mask, and that era of Zelda leading up until Twilight Princess, where it came back in full force. But like, for a good while there, like they were pretty successful in tricking the audience into thinking that like Zelda fell off, that it wasn't good anymore, that like Nintendo didn't know what they were doing, that they didn't respect the fans, that like the hardware was underpowered, that the games were just not very good anymore, right? Like they were able to convince people of that for a very, 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 very long time. And I think with this new era of Zelda, this new era of like Breath of the Wild games, I don't think I don't believe I don't believe that's still possible. I think more and more people are beginning to realize that like Zelda is better than Skyrim. It is better than Dark Souls. It is better than Cyberpunk 2077, better than GTA, better than like all of these generic open world RPG games, right? Like Zelda stops over all of them. And right now we're going through this process where the industry is slowly going to have to accept that. Like the physics engine alone in Tears of the Kingdom is like making waves in the community because like people are beginning to realize that like no other game can do what Tears of the Kingdom does. Like right now, like Twitter users are trying to convince people that like developers were making stuff like this in Gmod like 15 years ago, but where are they? Like, what games? Like, what games are you talking about, bro? Because nothing even comes close to what Tears of the Kingdom accomplishes. Like, nothing. Like, it's not just the vehicle building. It's like the open world setting, the vast length of the game, like, the applications you can use for all these vehicles. Like, nothing even comes close, right? That's the problem we're having here. Like they weren't even able to like downplay the open world and Breath of the Wild, not really. And now with like the vehicle building and everything they've added in Tears of the Kingdom, like they're getting increasingly desperate. They really are. And like, you're still seeing people like freaking out about, Elden Ring. Like I'm seeing people like saying that like, oh, Shadows of the Earth tree like by itself is going to be a bigger, better game than like Tears of the Kingdom was, which is a cope. Like it's just not going to happen. Like it's just it's just straight up delusional. Like it's only a matter of time until From Software falls off. Like I would argue it's happened already, but fanboys being fanboys are unwilling to admit it. Like we're still in that like that phase where The industry is throwing everything it has at Zelda, at Nintendo, to try and downplay their success. But no matter what they do, nothing they possibly can say will ever work.